This episode is brought to you by Promensal.
I think destigmatization is key. I think helping middle management and senior leaders to understand how to support their workforce that are going through these symptoms, helping them understand what the symptoms can be, helping them understand that not everybody experiences the same symptoms, but also not everybody wants to talk about them.
Welcome to Thriving in Menopause, brought to you by Prevention Magazine. I'm Zoe Mernier, the editor of Prevention. Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of season 9. Today, we're going to be looking at a really important factor in the menopausal journey, and that's menopause in the workplace. It's something that many of us are dealing with, and for so long there has been a mentality of just soldiering on in silence while we're grappling with these debilitating symptoms. So much so that statistics show that up to 13% of Australian women are actually leaving the workforce due to their menopausal symptoms. And it's a time of our lives when many women are in senior positions or at the peak of their careers, which of course only heightens the workplace gender divide. So to look at this issue further, we're joined by recruitment expert Sarah Piper, who is an advocate for destigmatising menopause in the workplace. The owner of Invisible Partners, Sarah is an innovative leader who encourages diversity and inclusion, with her forward-thinking business culture seeing her named as one of the Smart 50 workplaces of 2023. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Pleasure to be here, Zoe. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so tell us a bit about how you came to become an advocate for menopause in the workplace getting heard.
I think I'm not unique in the sense that I had experienced some symptoms myself and still do, and therefore through some relationship to the topic on a personal level, realised that it was a massive gap in corporate world and employment world, knowing that I own a business, and so I employ approximately 20 people, and most of those people are my age group, my vintage, and all of my workforce, not by design but by hook or by crook, are all female. So it was really interesting for me to have my own awareness to the subject through experience of it, and then reaching out and making sure that I was providing the right support to my own team. But we embed into different employment environments across Australia and support organisations with their recruitment as an internal function, and so have really extensive visibility around the relationship of other employers out there and how they approach this subject through all of those kind of relationships that made me really passionate about getting this right, or more right than it currently is.
Well, can you talk about some of the issues and problems that you've seen in your experience?
I think it's such an interesting issue that is not talked about, that is not only a gender issue, but it's an age-related issue. So it really exacerbates the already discrimination against both of those minorities in the workplace. I think it's further exacerbated by the fact that there is an imbalance of leadership from a gender perspective. So middle management to senior management, the bias toward those roles are held by men. They're often ill-informed, many of which are well-meaning, but just ill-informed. And so you have this group of people that are trying to do their best by their team, but with an absolute gap in their knowledge. And so often organizations might put in policies, forward-thinking organizations that are kind and well-meaning and people-centric would put in policies, but not necessarily inform or educate the middle management layer that are leading the biggest portion of the workforce to be on the front foot around managing and being sensitive to their workforce around these issues. So that's one of the biggest problems that I see.
Okay, so what are some of the most fundamental changes that you think need to take place in the workplace to make it more manageable for women at this stage of their lives?
It's a great question. I think it's destigmatization is the biggest challenge that I think we need to overcome. I think destigmatization, even in a social setting, I was out a couple of weeks ago with really good friends of the same vintage of me, men and women, and people were asking the "how are you" question. I'm like, I'm fine, but I'm really experiencing quite extreme perimenopausal symptoms. And you could have heard a pin drop. So it's still hugely stigmatized that I would even have the gall to talk about that, something so non-palatable over the dinner table. So I think destigmatization is key. I think helping middle management and senior leaders to understand how to support their workforce that are going through these symptoms, helping them understand what the symptoms can be, helping them understand that not everybody experiences the same symptoms, but also not everybody wants to talk about them. So I think it's about providing an inclusive and safe workplace that even if you don't want to take your manager into your confidence around what's happening for you on a health basis, that you have resources to go to, whether it be EAP assist, whether it be HR, or whether it be just understanding your entitlement. So making sure that middle management are aware of the policies and actually the personal impact on those policies and to their workforce.
Yeah. So what would be some of the more effective policies and procedures that would ideally be put in place?
I think having a flexible leave policy is really the key, because we all in our life cycle have different needs for leave, and you don't necessarily want to be singled out to say, I'm taking menopause leave today. Just having a flexible leave policy that allows you to access leave when you need it most. Helping middle management to understand the allowances that might need to be made in the workplace for people of this age group. So really from 40 up, being sensitive to the issues that females in their workforce might be experiencing. And knowing that they don't need to tackle it head on, they can just be sensitive to those issues and make sure that they're pointing their team members into the right direction. It's thinking about more practical things. So beyond the actual policies of leave, it's thinking about making sure that there's temperature control in the workplace, individual temperature control, thinking about giving access to mini breaks throughout the day for individuals and for all individuals, allowing people to have mental health walks around the block and making sure they get away from their screen if they're experiencing brain fog or any kind of temperature issues. Making sure that they're actually embodying a healthy workplace that is less centered around having a Friday night drinks and more centered around going for a nice walk over lunchtime to connect. So just thinking more holistically about an inclusive and healthy workplace. Now that's good for everybody. It's not just good for menopausal women, but I think it allow people of that demographic to feel included and therefore be able to access things that might reprieve some of their symptoms.
Absolutely. We'll be right back after this.
Perimenopause can actually start in your 40s. Declining estrogen production during perimenopause brings on changes to menstrual cycles and often the onset of hot flushes, night sweats, mood swings, and sexual problems. Promensal Peri is specifically designed for perimenopausal women and can help relieve these common menopausal symptoms. Promensal Peri is available at leading pharmacies across Australia and offers a cost-effective treatment at under $1 a day. When things start to change, try Promensal Peri. Always read the label and follow the directions for use.
Okay, we're back. So, why do you think, apart from the stigma, which obviously is probably one of the fundamental reasons, why do you think change in this area has been so slow and so difficult to achieve?
I think there's a self-consciousness around it because it is age-related. Generally speaking, it's normally women in their sort of late 40s, early 50s. So I think females are often quite self-conscious about their age anyway within their workplace. They don't necessarily want to draw attention further to the fact that they are of a particular demographic. So I think that's part of it, self-consciousness. Not wanting to appear any weaker or vulnerability. I think it's a real hurdle that, you get at that stage of your workplace, you're often at the pinnacle of your career, and to be able to raise a hand to say, I need a bit of extra support or I need some allowances is a big thing. And so I think many people in the workforce, many women in the workforce would really balk against that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons that there's been such a slowness in understanding how to support a huge portion of our workforce.
Yeah, I think that sort of relates to menopause in general of often women just feel like it's something that they've just got to grin and bear. It's just, their own private little burden that they've got to deal with. And, without the appreciation of just how debilitating it is that it is something that is greater than just a little nuisance that they've got to try and grapple with on the side. Do you know what I mean? So I think, I guess it's empowering women to say, this is what I'm going through. This is significant. There needs to be something in place. So on that, let's look at some of the ways that how would women go about advocating for themselves if they're in a workplace that is perhaps not particularly understanding or doesn't have systems in place?
Yeah. I think it's having agency and understanding what your rights are in the workplace. I think that's really important. So understanding what concessions you can request, having confidence to back yourself about these things. I think referring to your previous question around what's made it such a slow change, which also relates to this question, is there still a lack of education around the demographic that this is affecting?
Yeah.
I think there is still, as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, I have a large workforce of mostly women of this age group, and having spoken to some of them quite openly, because we have a really inclusive and open culture, some of them, which I've put in touch with reading material that are informing them, they've been blown away of, oh, this is what I'm actually experiencing. I didn't know. So I think there's a huge gap in general knowledge, even to the community that this is affecting.
Yeah.
And that has a knock-on effect to then be able to say, this is affecting me, and actually I need some concessions to be made. So I think agency, understanding what your rights are within the workplace, understanding this doesn't imply a weakness. It really is just a health condition that we need additional support for to allow us to be effective and perform at our optimal standard. And actually being able to take time out, understanding what moments in the day are your peak moments to architect a working day that's going to allow you to operate at your best. But not being scared or not being nervous to ask for what you need within the workplace. If you feel that you have the relationship with your one-up manager to take them into your confidence, being open with them, what you're going through is something that is not your fault, and it's completely natural. And being having agency and asking for what you need is an important part of it. So if you feel comfortable speaking to your own line manager, do. If you don't, then there are other functions within an organisation that are often safer places or less immediate places to go to.
Yes, indeed. So what about if someone really is so debilitated by perimenopause symptoms that they just can't work for a period, or that they don't feel that they can continue working? Is there ever, or should there be, or can there be any recourse or assistance or support there?
I think it's all about being open and navigating that with your organisation. So if you take your organisation, your employer into your confidence, and they might be able to suggest ways that you can reduce hours for a period of time, that you can look into things like job sharing, that you can look into having a career break. So having a moment in time where you just take some time out to restore, revive, and then revisit your workplace again. But it might actually come into question that you do want to change up how you architect your career. It might be that your priorities shift at this moment in time. And it's not to say that you can't sustain seniority, but it might change up how, what you use your energy for. If your energy becomes more finite, how do you apply it? And is your career energizing you? It's certainly a time in which it might cause you to pause and ask yourself those more fundamental questions about career. That might be triggered by your menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms.
Absolutely. Okay, so obviously we appreciate that supporting workers and allowing flexibility during this time of their lives is crucial. But can you talk a bit more about some of the ways that it is so valuable to have that support?
Absolutely. Having a diverse workforce and an inclusive workforce has a knock-on effect to the commercial performance of an organisation. Those workplaces that do it really well, that are inclusive, that wrap their arms around all of the demographics within their organisation, are the ones that commercially fly. So it's not just about being good corporate citizens. It actually has a commercial impact to the outcome of the organisation, and it's often representative of the customer base that they're working with, and it's representative of the community that they're representing. Whether it's a non-profit, whether it's a corporate organisation. So it's really, really important that we don't just lose this intellectual property, this knowledge base, just because these symptoms can be debilitating. So I think it's just it's important in so many ways that we support people or women through this period of their life to have the benefit of their knowledge and their wisdom for the long term.
Absolutely. Okay, so can we talk a bit about how the current situation contributes to the superannuation gap between men and women? Because it's not just about losing them for a period of time, but it can have even more long-reaching effects, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I was mentioning in a question or two ago, this is a point where often women at the pinnacle of their career, having already had potentially gaps for raising their family or other interruptions to their career. And so this is a point where we really should be doubling down and looking to recoup that gap in superannuation and the earning divide. And this set of circumstances really impacts that. And so I think it's absolutely vital that workplaces make accommodations, look at creative ways of solving the problem. It's really difficult to give a catch-all to your listeners around this is what you should do in every set of circumstances, because it really depends on whether it's a customer-facing role that they're in, whether it's a leadership role that they're in. But there's always ways to make concessions, to change the working environment, to allow you not to lose, not necessarily to have to step away from that earning potential, just to manage your symptoms. Yep. So I think it's just about being brave, knowing what your rights are, being open, and coming into those conversations with a solution orientation around what you need to support your performance.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that some of the bigger corporations are probably more likely to have started putting policies and procedures in place. But have you had much sort of experience or knowledge of how this might play out across perhaps a range of different industries, perhaps like small businesses or...
Small businesses are difficult because you have got there's less latitude around which roles you can move into, and the kind of, the support they've got in terms of their financial confidence to support your concessions. However, there's always ways and means. So yes, larger organisations do have, generally speaking, are more progressive and have more investment in their infrastructure around policies, but they still miss a trick around that middle management and that actually the application of those policies and the access of those policies. So I think that's still a huge gap there. Within small business, again, it's the same sort of counsel that I would give your listeners, is really going into those organisations with your one-up manager and seeking a middle ground to be found, looking at solutions for yourself that you need. So what do you need and what are you asking for? So it's not just going into your employer saying, I have a problem here, how can you help? It's really, I have a problem here. If I could just start at 10 o'clock to be able to, get over my horrible night that I've had, or if I can work a little bit later in the evenings, so that's where I optimally perform, then those tiny concessions can have a massive impact around how you perform, the sustainability of your work. So I think it's just about being solution oriented and being creative with the way that you cut things up. It doesn't need to be 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, tackling things. I think with you're absolutely right to talk about different sectors. So if you're in frontline healthcare, for example, it can be a harder thing to be as flexible, but there are still ways and means to do things like job sharing, to be creative with rostering, to be creative with sharing shifts. If you're in frontline customer service, it's similar advice that I would apply. I think there's always ways and means in which you access the kind of concessions you need to be able to sustain work and not have to step away from the workforce.
Yeah. Do you know of other countries that are more progressive in this area that we can kind of aspire towards or get some inspiration from?
I think Australia is pretty good.
Yeah.
So I'm reasonably aware, with my dodgy accent, you can probably tell that I'm not from Australia originally. So I've been here for 18 years, but I'm Scottish originally. And the UK is doing a reasonable job of being more vocal in mainstream media. And because of that vocalness on mainstream media with some really, really useful documentaries and a particular journalist there called Davina McCall that's brought the whole topic to life. It's created huge change in corporations and it's created huge change in the reporting of it in mainstream media. I think that's been an inspiration for me to hear how some of those organisations are responding to the raise in profile of it. And that's allowed it to be a little bit more palatable to men in our life and to understand what it looks like to be a male advocate for people that are experiencing menopause. What are we asking of our male friends? It's really just being informed and knowing what sort of support you can point your colleagues in the direction of. And so I think I'm not aware of any other countries that are doing things better than us per se. I think the UK and Australia are leading the pack. Asian countries that I'm acutely aware of are even further behind in terms of the openness around the subject.
Of course, yes.
I think Australia are doing a reasonable job, but I think we all could do better around making it more mainstream and palatable.
For sure. Sarah, thank you so much for your valuable insights. We really appreciate you joining us today.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
And listeners, thank you for joining us too. If you've enjoyed this episode, please click the button and subscribe. And for more great tips about living your best life at midlife, make sure you pick up a copy of Prevention Magazine. I'm Zoe Mernier, and I'll see you next time.